It's 1986 in Australia. My name's Tim.
I'm Cameron.
And I'm Francis.
And the biggest song of the year is by Diana Ross, Chain Reaction. Remember that one, Cameron? You weren't even born. You weren't even a twinkle in the postman's eye. Get in the middle of the chain definitely a comeback for Diana Ross. Also in 1986, When the Going Gets Tough, The Tough Gets Going by Billy Ocean. That was a big song in 1986. Touch Me, I Want Your Body. Francis, I'm not talking about songs. I'm actually making a request here.
Ew.
Venus by Bananarama, and the biggest song of 1986 was Stimulation by Wah Wah Nee. Well, the 80s was just full of classics. It was fantastic. And in film, the biggest moment in Australia's film industry really happened in 1986, Francis.
Yes, on the 30th of April, Crocodile Dundee was released in Australia. The film will then go on to become a worldwide smash hit, becoming the highest grossing Australian film until 2015.
Until 2015? It was actually surpassed by something, was it?
Yes.
Really? Do you know what that was?
No.
You were scared I was going to ask that, but it's just that I
just realised that now.
That's okay, not a problem. But Paul Hogan was recently interviewed, and I'm sure they mentioned there, not that they always get their facts right, that it was still the biggest box office smash in Australians' cinema history. Be interesting to know what surpassed it in 2015.
Well,
Maybe
it took
somebody.
a long time. So
Yeah, it was a long time. Maybe somebody can leave a comment and let us know.
And then the fun fact was, after the movie appeared, tourists rang up the Plaza Hotel asking for Mick Dundee's room.
Oh, you're joking.
And also asking for rooms with bidets. The hotel, however, doesn't have any rooms with bidets.
Bidets, of course, was one of the funny scenes in the movie where Mick Dundee is trying to work out what on earth a bidet is. Cameron, who's 15 years old, is actually looking at us like he doesn't know what a bidet is either, Francis.
Well, not.
No. you can explain it to him.
They're still not common.
But the fact is the hotel doesn't have any. And the one that was in the movie was made by the movie crew.
Oh.
There you go. And it also, of course, spawned so many different catchphrases that still last to this day, the biggest of which being, who knows?
That's not enough.
This is a knife. I think people always get it wrong,
Which was actually going to be cut out of the movie.
It was going to be cut out?
Oh, wow.
Yes, the writers did not think it was going to be... It was not funny on paper.
That's amazing. I never knew that.
Yeah. On a very sad note, in 1986, Samantha Knight was... she disappeared from Bondi. Samantha Knight was born in 1977. She actually lived in Manly in Sydney with her parents Tess Knight and Peter O'Meara, but they divorced at an early stage. Samantha then lived with her mother in Bronte, but by 1986 they were living in a block of flats in Imperial Avenue, Bondi. Samantha Knight went missing on the 19th of August 1986, and despite an intensive campaign in which posters of her were displayed all over New South Wales, she was never found. Now, I have to say I have a personal link to this because Samantha Knight actually went to the school which was right opposite mine. We used to wave to each other, the two schools, St Patrick's in Bondi, Wellington Street Public in Bondi. We could see each other, and at lunchtimes it was the thing to do, to wave to each other. And I'd walk the same route because I lived on the corner of Imperial Avenue. Actually had walked in a group with Samantha Knight plenty of times home, and she was seen in the news agency where all us little kids, back then parents didn't pick kids up, you know. You'd walk home on your own if it wasn't very far with your backpack that was bigger than you. And we often did stop at the news agency, which was just across the lights there opposite St Patrick's Church, and buy literally Redskins, spearmints, whatever you could get, you know, for 5 or 10 cents at the news agency there. Samantha Knight was actually seen at that news agency that day. I remember when it was a police blitz when she went missing. The posters up everywhere, and what it doesn't mention in that information I just read there, they also had mannequins, which is a fairly new concept. They had a mannequin of Samantha Knight, exactly what she was wearing at the time. They interviewed a lot of children, including me, very briefly.
Oh, wow.
You know, what do you remember? Where was she? Where did you last see her? But to this day, they do believe they've got a fairly good theory about what happened to Samantha Knight, but to this day it is still technically a mystery that has never been solved. In Queensland in 1986, there was a fairly significant mine explosion, Cameron.
Yes, so it is Thursday, the 17th of July 1986, and 12 men, presumed deceased, are trapped in a coal mine in the Queensland town of Moora. It all started at 11:10 a.m. when a massive explosion tore up the drift mine where miners were busy working. Thousands of tons of rubble collapsed on the soils, and every attempt to retrieve the bodies was halted by dangerous gas levels. The town is in mourning. Yeah, and it was a small town, and so everyone knew each other, and that was like they were connected to everyone in the town, so it was a horrible thing.
Had a huge impact. Now, in 1986, as in 1985, we had a full year of Bob Hawke's prime ministership. Elizabeth II remained our monarch. That's never going to change throughout any of these podcasts, all the way up to the present day. Neville Rand was the Premier of New South Wales up until July 4, and then Barry Unsworth actually won government. And in Queensland, Sir Joe Bjelke-Petersen is worth mentioning because he had a very long reign as Premier, and a controversial one at that. It was a pretty horrific year, 1986, in terms of crime. Nurse Anita Cobby was abducted, robbed, raped and murdered by John Travers, Michael Murdoch and Leslie, Gary and Michael Murphy at Prospect in Sydney. All 5 men were sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in June of 1987. It was one of the most horrendous cases of abduction and rape that the country has ever seen. Also in 1986, following Lindy Chamberlain's identification of a baby's jacket found near Ayers Rock has been similar to the one worn by her baby Azaria, her case took a turn. And by the 9th of February of the same year, 1986, Lindy Chamberlain was released from prison in Darwin on licence after serving 39 months of a life sentence. And of course, Cameron, we've spoken about Lindy Chamberlain in previous podcasts, right back to 1980, I believe. So if people want to hear a little bit more about the lead up to that, and we will be talking more about Lindy Chamberlain in upcoming podcasts because it's just a saga that went through the years, especially the 80s. On the 27th of March in 1986, the Russell Street bombing took place. It was at the headquarters of Victoria Police in Melbourne. A police constable, Angela Taylor, was killed. Francis.
On the 11th of February, more than 100 bushfires burnt across the state of Victoria.
Bushfires, it was a huge bushfire, a year for bushfires in 1986. Yeah. And in 1986, there was also some twists and turns in aviation, Cameron.
So in 1986, Trans-Australia Airlines transformed itself. From then on, it was known as Australian Airlines, with a new plane design boasting a blue kangaroo on its tail. The colours, gold, blue and white, were another change implemented to scream Australia.
So Australian Airlines was sort of born, even though it was, it was a change of names in some sense. I remember Australian Airlines, it was a huge advertising blitz at the time.
Yeah.
And that really tried to steal Qantas's thunder, if my memory serves me correctly, because, they really branded it as the Aussie airline. They went for the green and gold. I don't know what colours did you mention there?
Gold, blue and white.
Yeah, that's right. I think maybe green and gold was a little bit too cliched, but I tell you what, we should actually, over the top of this podcast, we'll show people the logo for Australian Airlines, because I'm pretty sure it was very close to green and gold.
Yeah, no, it was a marketing strategy, really.
Yeah. Now, 1986 was the year where Paul Keating was famously treasurer, and he and Hawke seemed to have some agreement of a succession plan. But it was a big year for Paul Keating, actually. Francis, tell us a little bit about it.
Yes. On the 27th of November, Paul Keating was found liable to a fine of $4,000 for not lodging his tax return for both 1985 and 1986.
It's pretty poor when the treasurer of the country doesn't lodge his tax returns for 2 years running, isn't it? Don't you reckon?
That was John Howard's argument and wanted him fired.
He wanted him fired, but he didn't go anywhere, I can tell you that.
No. He had no consequences, though, due to the fact that Paul Keating reasoned that he expected tax refunds those 2 years. So he didn't have to put in.
I'm trying to think about that. Doesn't sound like it would hold up in court, Mr. Keating.
Yeah, a bit controversial.
Yeah, that's like me. I'm just trying to imagine me saying to Mr. Court Taxman, I'm really sorry. I just thought I was going to get a really big refund, so I thought it was best for the country if I didn't lodge it at all. Is that basically his argument, was it?
That was his argument.
And it worked.
And because it had no big effect, it didn't change the economy, it didn't do anything like that, that's why he got it.
The common man wouldn't get away with that. It was also earlier that year. I know that happened around probably October, November or somewhere.
November.
But in May of 1986, he actually made that famous off-the-cuff comment that Australia was becoming a banana republic.
Yes.
And so, Paul Keating was a master orator. He had a fantastic way with words, but he was also the king of putting his boot in his mouth. So it sounds like 1986 probably wasn't his best of years, although, of course, he
Not only
went
that,
on to become the Prime Minister later.
John Howard also attacked him for his huge travel expenses.
I'm not surprised there was a lot of ammunition being thrown towards the Hawke-Keating government.
Try to defame him a little bit.
So, that was 1986 in Australia. Thank you, ball boys. Thank you, players.